What's up, vinyl community? Glad to be back to do another video, this time showing a little bit more metal. And that's because I was challenged when I was watching Lee. He did an upload on the Noise Spectrum channel talking about how there's been a little less metal being shown in the VC lately. So wanted to remedy that by grabbing, pulling out my Metal Massacre compilation and sharing that with everybody. Share a little bit of the history and go through the releases. And then just like Vinyl 79 or Lee does himself, I'll show them just kind of leaning up against the crate here, pulling them out and making some comments. But just to kind of set the tone, Brian Slagel, you think of Metal Blade Records, think of Brian Slagel. He founded the label very early on, and basically it turned from a fanzine, the Metal Review, and turned that into, finagled his way into being able to do a release. And then as legend has it, Lars rushes this poorly recorded cassette tape of him and James Hetfield recording Hit the Lights, and getting that to Brian just in time to meet the deadline and make it on a metal compilation, you know, basically breaking Metallica to the world. So this happens to be a third pressing with Hit the Lights version re-recorded with McGovney and Dave Mustaine. Just raw and furious. I have to imagine what it was like for those experiencing this sound for the first time. Also want to point out that the Malice track, Kick You Down, is also killer. On Metal Massacre II, we find Armored Saint, Lesson Well Learned. I tell you, the musicianship seems to stand out among the others, and just some really insane lead guitars. You'll also find Cliff Burton's band Trauma with the track Such a Shame. Really good riffs, killer groove. Also Overkill. Great band name, but this is not Feel the Fire Overkill. This is Overkill that released only one album, Show Triumph of the Kill. Check out this label on the top left. I don't know if this came from Metal Blade, but it sure looks like it was hand typed on a typewriter and placed on all the copies. Metal Massacre III knocks the world for a loop again with early thrash classic Aggressive Perfector. Taking this comp as a whole, you could really tell that early examples of punk are starting to be mixed with metal, more crossover and thrash and crossover thrash, and some straight up heavy metal on this one. Nice discovery on this comp was Snow White, later spelled with a Z. They went on to release 3 speed metal-ish albums. Pretty cool. On 4, we find Trouble, Ethrop, Abator, Lizzie Borden, Thrust. I mean, things are really getting interesting, and maybe even a pinnacle for the compilation, as major labels were catching on to signing metal bands and making it a lot harder for Brian to find the good ones. Before I forget, Abator has Juan Garcia on guitar. So by the time we get to Metal Massacre V, only 2 years have gone by. And this one is no slouch either. We got Voivod, Overkill, this time it's the Feel the Fire and Taking Over Overkill. Fate's Warning, killer track there called Soldier Boy. Metal Church is on this. Mace is really thrashy, and then the comp starts out with Omen. I'd really like to get some of this on vinyl, even on a Bonsai label would be sweet. In 1985, we see Metal Massacre VI. This happens to be a West German pressing. On this comp, we find Hollow's Eve with their killer track Metal Merchant. We also have Hyrax doing Bombs of Death. Dark Angel is on this with Gene Hoglan, who was famous for being in Dark Angel, Forbidden, Fear Factory. Later on with Strapping Young Lad, did some time with Testament. And also more recently, band I really like, Unearthed. Also a killer track from Possessed. I mean, just try not to headbang playing this track. Metal Massacre VII has a lot of one-off bands, but a couple I want to point out is Heretic. Scott Waters turned me on to the band. This has a non-album track Impulse on it. I think it was about the time that they recorded Breaking Point. And also an extremely energetic thrashing song from Flotsam and Jetsam. Metal Massacre VIII comes out in 1987. Most of these bands are one-offs, but 2 stand out, Sacred Reich, which I love, and also War God. Metal Massacre IX, I mean, the Reaper must have got bored with harvesting souls, so now he's taking up skating lessons. But this is a really interesting journey because I start to see some power metal, they continue with the thrash vibe, but then also some progressive metal pops up on here. A handful of obscure thrash bands from California, a few from the Southwest, I think East Coast thrashers, Faith or Fear, which I love. They play Dehumanized, very underrated. Check out their albums. Another band that Scott Waters turned me on to, Banshee. They kick off the compilations with We Want You. They end up doing like 5 albums all the way up to Mindslave in 2012, which is recently reissued by No Life Till Metal and sounds fantastic. Also, don't want to forget Toxic. I want to look up more about this band. I thought the track was killer. On 10, the only band I slightly recognize is Canada's Slaughter. Start to dig deeper into the mix of thrash and crossover, but now we're starting to see some more doom and progressive sounds. Really adds to the variety of the compilation. So for 11, 12, and 13, I got a couple tapes and a couple in CD because they're just not available on vinyl. For 11, we got Forte on there, Havoc, a band called Dominance from Philly, and then also Mortal Rain were pretty cool. Again, a mix of death metal, black metal, doom. Brian Faith was on here. Brian Faith is the dude with the ridiculously long dreads that's in Shadows Fall, really a pioneer of the metalcore scene. He's on there. And then on Big Twin Den, look that band up and find out that Stacey Anderson from Hallows Eve is on that. And then I didn't want to forget also Mike D'Antonio from Killswitch Engage was also in Overcast, so that's pretty cool. Metal Massacre 13, like I said, they start to lose me a little bit when it gets too dark or too much death metal. I'm kind of open to giving it a try once in a while. Black Dalia Murder, which I saw at Ozfest before, they're pretty good. It's kind of my introduction to that kind of metalcore sound. 6 Feet Under is on here, and you'll recognize like 6 Feet Under and Bolt Throwers on here. Also, Amon Amarth is on here. So for Metal Massacre 14, this came out in 2016. This is the last Metal Massacre release to date while I'm recording this video. It is available in this really nice 180 gram vinyl package, which is really cool. Greeno gave me the tip on it because it had a couple high roller bands on there. Also a couple new album tracks, more leaning towards new album. But again, a lot of variety. Some of this is really brutal, death or hardcore. I find myself recognizing the bands on these compilations less and less, but that's all part of the exploration of compilation series. So that wraps up all 14 of the metal compilations. So as a bonus, I want to show you 3 other compilations that Metal Blade did working in conjunction with Martin Popoff on the Encyclopedia of Heavy Metal. These compilations are all killer, no filler. This is the one from the 80s. This is the 90s. And this is what they selected to represent the 2000s. So that's all the Metal Massacre releases to date. One thing's for sure as I go through all of these, from 1982 to 2016, it's just a great documentation, beginning with underground metal in the early 80s, all the way through to how the genre evolved and split off into so many branches along the way. Thanks for checking out the series. Hope you come back. Everybody out in the vinyl community, happy hunting and take care.